Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
I am so ready for this one.
Oh, me too. Because today we're heading somewhere that, well, almost nobody goes. And honestly, that is entirely the point of this journey. We are talking directly to you.
Yeah, the listener who is just, completely exhausted by heavily curated, overcrowded tourist traffic.
Exactly. If you want something genuinely different, even if it requires, let's be real, a little bit of suffering to get there, you're in the right place. We are setting out on a massive deep dive into the Banda Islands of Indonesia.
The original Spice Kingdom.
Yes, we're talking about this microscopic collection of islands that literally triggered, 400 years of global colonial war?
Yep, all over one specific agricultural product, nutmeg.
Nutmeg! It's wild. So today, we are going to unpack exactly what it takes to get to one of the most isolated, most historically dense, and just beautifully broken destinations in all of Southeast Asia.
And we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. So here is the roadmap for you. We are going to go through 11 specific segments in order today. We'll be teasing the brutal 8-hour ferry ride.
Oh, it was brutal.
The crumbling Dutch forts, the $20 a night guest houses that have absolutely zero Wi-Fi, and the world-class scuba diving that honestly rivals Raja Ampat, but at a fraction of the cost.
Right. And ultimately, we are going to answer the absolute biggest question for your specific travel style, which is this extreme logistical effort actually worth the payoff?
Because the logistics here, they are not just a minor inconvenience that you can just throw some money at to fix.
No, not at all. They are a defining characteristic of the entire experience. This deep dive is tailored for a very specific type of traveler. If you are the kind of person who, doesn't mind the complete rack of barista coffee.
Or perfectly manicured sidewalks.
Right. If you can give up the sidewalks just to sit on the walls of an authentic 17th century Dutch fort entirely by yourself at sunrise, then you are exactly who we are talking to today.
Absolutely. So we are going to look at everything from the required mindset to the exact dollar amounts you need to survive this trip. Let's start with segment 1. We need to reframe everything you might think you know about this tiny speck on the map.
Because the history is just so heavy here. You have to understand it before you even look at a flight path.
Right. So let's use an analogy for you. I want you to imagine nutmeg, not as a spice sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. I want you to imagine it as the 17th century equivalent of a highly explosive tech stock.
That is the best way to look at it.
Because back then, a single pound of nutmeg could literally buy you an entire multi-story house in Amsterdam.
It sounds completely made up, I know.
It sounds like insane hyperbole. An entire house in a major European capital traded for what? A small bag of dried seeds that you can just hold in the palm of your hand.
But it's absolute historical fact, and the reason we have to start with that valuation is to really grasp the sheer scale of the global consequence that it triggered. Like, why was it so incredibly expensive?
Was it just because it tasted good?
Well, no. In 17th century Europe, nutmeg wasn't just a flavor enhancer. It was a massive status symbol for the ultra-wealthy. And practically, it was used heavily to mask the taste of poorly preserved meat.
Because this is an era way before refrigeration.
Right. But crucially, and this is where the panic sets in, there was a widespread, desperate medical belief that wearing a little pouch of nutmeg around your neck could actually ward off the bubonic plague.
Oh, wow. So you have a product that's driven by vanity, by food preservation, and literal life or death panic.
Exactly. So the demand curve is just off the charts. It's totally inelastic. And because of that insane demand, the supply chain became militarized. Wars were fought. Entire indigenous populations of these islands were systematically wiped out or enslaved.
It's incredibly dark history.
It is. And the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, stepped into this void. Historically, the VOC was the world's first true multinational corporation. If we extend your tech stock metaphor, the VOC was the ultimate, ruthless, monopolistic tech giant of its era.
Right. I mean, they issued stock, they had their own private army.
They minted their own currency, and they ran a massive, uncompromising global monopoly. And the heavily fortified server farm, to use your analogy, where all this wealth was generated, was right here, on a collection of islands so small that most modern global maps don't even bother labeling them.
Which is genuinely mind-blowing when you zoom in on a map. We are talking about 10 tiny volcanic outcrops in the middle of the Banda Sea.
Geography-wise, they're located roughly 2,000 kilometers east of Bali.
Just to put the physical size into perspective for you, the total land area of all the islands combined is just 80 square kilometers. The current population is around 20,000 people. And yet, This tiny rock was the beating heart of the global economy.
Yeah.
But this brings me to a really important point about how we categorize destinations today. People love to throw around the phrase hidden gem online. I want to completely banish that phrase from this deep dive. The Banda Islands are not a hidden gem.
I am so glad we're making that distinction right out of the gate. Hidden gem is such a dangerous term in modern travel marketing.
Right, because it implies that a place is pristine, that it's polished, and just waiting to be easily consumed by anyone who stumbles upon it.
Exactly. It implies comfort and obscurity.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely not what Banda is. The Banda Islands are a genuinely remote, genuinely difficult, and genuinely broken destination. The infrastructure there lags years, if not decades, behind its own historical narrative.
But that lag creates this concept that you call beautiful broken, right?
Yes.
So unpack beautiful broken for me. What does that actually feel like when you are walking around there?
It means you are getting a raw, completely unmediated experience. There is no curated, polished resort feel.
Yeah.
You cannot replicate this in Bali or Lombok.
Where heritage is usually, sanitized and packaged up for mass consumption.
Right. In Banda, you step into a place where the colonial infrastructure is actively deteriorating. It's literally being reclaimed by the jungle and patched together by the local community. There are no velvet ropes telling you where to stand. You are left alone with the ruins. The beauty comes from the authenticity of that decay. You feel the isolation. The difficulty of just existing there is exactly what provides the authentic atmosphere.
Which honestly makes right now a very precarious time to go. The urgency to visit is incredibly specific. For you listening, there is a very loud ticking clock pointing directly at the years 2026 and 2027. We are talking about a rapidly closing window.
We really are.
Why? Because Indonesia's Ministry of Tourism has specifically targeted Maluku province, which is the broader region where Banda is, for intense tourism development. There is currently an active UNESCO tentative listing for the historic and marine landscape of the Banda Islands.
And that nomination is actively progressing through the bureaucratic pipeline right now in 2026.
Right. And we know exactly the mechanism of what happens when a formal UNESCO listing arrives.
Oh, we've seen this playbook execute all over the world, from Hoi An in Vietnam to Georgetown in Malaysia. It is a double-edged sword. A UNESCO listing isn't just a fancy plaque on a wall. It is a massive unlock for international preservation grants and domestic infrastructure funding.
And the moment that status is granted, which could be in just 24 to 36 months from now, the money will flow in.
Exactly.
Which means the islands get fixed, right?
Yes, but at a profound cost to the current atmosphere. The crumbling forts will be stabilized and restored, which, okay, is objectively good for history, but they will inevitably get ticket booths and guided tours and restricted access.
Yeah, the raw era is over.
The unmediated, unfiltered history will begin its inevitable fade into a heavily curated, heavily managed tourism experience. And when you combine that with Indonesia's rapidly growing domestic middle class discovering the Maluku region for their own holidays, the window for this rugged, solitary experience is closing super fast.
So if you're listening to this and you are convinced that you need to go before the UNESCO money changes the entire fabric of the islands, we really need to talk about the gateway pricing. Because this isn't some cheap weekend getaway. Even if the island itself is cheap once you arrive, just getting to the starting line requires a massive geographic and financial moat.
The gateway pricing is vital to understand up front. It's going to be the overwhelming bulk of your expenditure. The financial hurdle is not the hotel in Banda. The hurdle is getting yourself to Ambon.
Ambon, which is the capital city of Maluku province, and the absolute mandatory launch pad for the ferry to Banda.
Right.
I know you have the exact foundational flight costs pulled up. Give me the breakdown. What is a listener actually looking at just to get to Ambon?
Okay, let's run the global routes. If you were starting in Europe, say London to Kuala Lumpur, you were looking at around $450 for that long haul. But you aren't done.
Not even close.
No. From KL, you need a connecting flight down into Jakarta, and then a separate domestic flight from Jakarta across the archipelago to Ambon. That final leg adds another $80 to $120. So from London all the way to Ambon, you should budget roughly $650 to $850 total.
Okay, what if I'm coming from North America? Like Toronto?
Oh, that is going to be your most expensive and grueling route. From Toronto, you are routing through the Middle East or East Asia, then into Jakarta, then Ambon. You are looking at $900 to $1,100 just to touch down in Maluku.
Wow. Okay, what about the Pacific Sphere, Australia, New Zealand?
It gets slightly easier, but still carries a premium. An Auckland-Ambon route will run between $550 and $700 US. And a return flight from Sydney to Ambon is generally going to cost you $480 to $600 US.
So you drop all this money, and once you finally drag your exhausted self into the Ambon airport, you still have to take a ferry to get to the actual Banda Islands. But the crazy part is, after spending up to $1,000 just to get there, that slow ferry option is only about $5 US.
I know. The financial whiplash is insane.
It really is.
It is a perfect illustration of the remote travel economy, though. You pay a massive premium to cross the macrogeography, but once you enter the local microeconomy, the costs plummet to almost nothing.
But the cost of the flights is only half the battle here. Which brings us to segment 2. Because if you book those expensive flights at the wrong time of year, you are flying into a trap.
A literal trap.
This isn't like booking a trip to Cancun where you just deal with a little extra humidity. We need to talk about exactly when to attempt this journey. Getting the calendar wrong here is genuinely dangerous.
To understand why the calendar is a matter of physical safety, we first need to understand the physical context of the ocean you are trying to cross.
Right, the Banda Sea.
The Banda Sea is not a shallow, tranquil, sandy lagoon. You are dealing with one of the deepest ocean basins on the entire planet. The geography here is defined by extreme tectonic and volcanic activity. The islands themselves are essentially just the very tips of massive underwater mountains.
Right.
And surrounding these tiny islands are monumental underwater walls that drop straight down into the abyss for 1,500 meters.
1,500 meters straight down. That is almost a mile of vertical water.
Yes. And because of this profound oceanic depth and the massive upwelling of deep, cold currents hitting those volcanic walls, you get an incredible marine environment that creates water clarity that gives you visibility of 30 meters on a good day.
Which is insane for diving.
It is. It also acts as a deep water sewage highway for massive pelagic marine life. The nutrient upwelling brings in schools of hammerhead sharks, migrating whale sharks, massive tunas right past the islands. It is a wildly dynamic, energetic body of water.
So with a sea that deep, that energetic, and that prone to massive oceanic currents, the calendar dictates absolutely everything. You have 2 distinct seasons. You have the dry season, which is your window of opportunity. That runs broadly from April through November.
Yep.
But if you had to pinpoint the absolute best time for a listener to lock in their flights, what is the undeniable perfect time to go?
October and November, without a shadow of a doubt. During those 2 specific months, the environmental factors align perfectly. The seas are at their absolute calmest, which is critical for surviving the massive open ocean ferry crossing without being violently ill.
Trust me, you do not want to be ill on that boat.
Exactly. The underwater visibility for diving hits its absolute peak. The ambient air temperature sits very comfortably around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius. And perhaps most culturally significant, the major nutmeg harvest on the large island of Banda Besar begins during these months. It is the absolute sweet spot. Weather, water conditions, and local culture all intersect perfectly.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's look at the other side of the calendar, the wet season. That runs from December through March. Is it really that bad? I mean, a lot of people go to places like Thailand or Costa Rica in the quote-unquote wet season, and it usually just means you get a heavy rainstorm for an hour in the afternoon while you sit at the bar. Can't you just pack a solid Gore-Tex jacket and save some money?
This is where Western assumptions about tropical weather become incredibly dangerous. It really raises an important point about how we perceive weather in deeply remote maritime regions.
Right.
No, it is not just a little rain in the afternoon. The wet season in this specific region is driven by the western monsoon. The Banda Sea earns a fierce, destructive reputation during these months. The oceanic swells become massive. The water becomes incredibly rough, making those open ocean ferry crossings genuinely dangerous.
Wow.
And because the local captains understand this danger, ferry services frequently and abruptly cancel without warning.
Wait, so you could be standing at the port in Ambon, having spent $1,000 to get there, and they just say, sorry, boat isn't going today.
Or worse.
Yeah.
You can make it to Banda, and then a monsoon system rolls in, and the ferry stops running for a week. Being stranded on the islands for days or even weeks longer than you originally planned is a very real, documented possibility.
That is terrifying.
It's not a matter of getting a little wet on your vacation. It is a matter of getting physically stuck, missing your expensive international flights home, and dealing with a local island supply chain that slows to an absolute crawl because the cargo ships also can't make the crossing.
Message loudly received. Avoid December through March at all costs unless you want an involuntary, indefinite extension to your trip.
Exactly.
So let's assume you've booked for October. Let's talk about the crowds, or rather, the staggering absence of them. I really want to put this in perspective for you. Current estimates show that the Banda Islands receive somewhere between 2,000 to 3,500 foreign visitors. And I want to be very clear. That is not per month.
No, no.
That is per year. 2 to 3,500 people a year. For context, Bali sees roughly 6 million visitors annually. Even Komodo National Park, which a lot of people consider to be a wild, remote adventure, gets 30,000 visitors monthly.
The math is staggering when you lay it out side by side like that.
It's totally different scale.
What that means in practical day-to-day terms for you as a traveler is that you will experience profound, unmanufactured solitude. When you walk up the stone steps of Fort Belgica at dawn, you will likely be the only human being there.
Which is just a crazy thought in today's travel landscape.
Right. When you sit down at a local warung to eat lunch, you will almost certainly be the only foreigner in the entire establishment. The solitude here isn't a luxury product manufactured by a high-end resort spreading out its private villas. It is an authentic, unavoidable solitude, dictated entirely by the sheer logistical difficulty of arriving.
But here is a massive contradiction that trips people up. Because the absolute numbers are so low, the booking timelines seem totally counterintuitive. You would think, hey, hardly anyone goes there. I can just wing it and book a room when I get off the boat.
Absolutely do not do that.
No. During the peak of the dry season, which spans July through September and into October, you actually need to book your accommodation 4 to 6 weeks in advance. Why? Because the inventory of beds on the island is incredibly tiny.
It creates a micro bottleneck. You only have a couple of thousand tourists a year, sure, but you only have a few dozen viable rooms across the entire island. If 20 people arrive on the ferry and haven't booked ahead, the town is effectively sold out.
And then what do? Sleep on the street.
Pretty much. Now, if you go in the shoulder season, say April through June, you'll pay the exact same low prices, but you'll encounter even fewer people and have a bit more flexibility.
Good to know. Okay, segment 3. You've picked the right month, you've avoided the monsoon swells, and you've pre-booked your tiny guest house room. Let's get into what that journey to the islands actually looks, feels, and smells like. You've landed at the airport in Ambon. Where do you go?
Your gateway to the Banda Sea is Tulahu Port. Tulahu is located about 45 minutes outside of the Ambon city center. When you land, you'll likely negotiate a ride in a shared local minibus known as a BMO to get to the port.
And how much is that?
That hour-long ride will cost you the grand sum of about $1.50.
Amazing. And once you arrive at Tulahu Port, you are presented with 2 choices for the crossing. You've got the fast ferry, which is the option 99% of independent travelers take. It leaves Ambon strictly on Tuesday and Saturday mornings, and it returns from Banda on Wednesday and Sunday. This express boat costs 750,000 Indonesian rupiah, which converts to roughly $47.
Yeah, that's the one.
But please do not let the word express or the $50 price tag fool you into thinking you are getting a luxury catamaran.
Oh, no. The fast ferry is an endurance event. It takes roughly 5 to 6 hours. You should expect rigid, hard plastic seats.
The worst.
You should expect very loud Indonesian pop music blasting from the televisions at the front of the cabin for the entire duration of the journey. There is absolutely zero Wi-Fi. Cell service drops out within the first hour, and you will be sharing an incredibly tight personal space with local traders hauling boxes of goods, fisherfolk, and other divers whose massive gear bags seem to take up 3 seats each.
It sounds like pure chaos.
And the air conditioning is usually either completely broken or functioning at Arctic blast levels with no in-between.
So wear a sweater, but be prepared to sweat. It is an intensely local transit experience. But what about the other option? You mentioned a slow ferry earlier that only cost $5.
Yes. For the truly budget-conscious, or those with endless patience, there is the slow ferry. This is operated by Peloni, which is the Indonesian state shipping line. These are massive, hulking passenger ships that do laps around the entire Indonesian archipelago. The ticket is incredibly cheap, only $5 to $8, but the journey takes anywhere from 8 to 14 hours.
14 hours.
Heavily dependent on the sea conditions and how much cargo they are loading and unloading at each stop. And you are sleeping on a mattress in a massive open dormitory deck with hundreds of other people.
Okay, let's fast forward through the plastic seats, the blaring pop music, and the engine noise of that fast ferry crossing. Because the payoff, the moment the boat slows down and you finally see the destination, Arrival at Banda Neira is arguably one of the most cinematic, jaw-dropping travel experiences left on the planet.
It really is.
Imagine this. You are standing on the deck, pulling into the harbor, and rising straight out of the incredibly deep blue water directly in front of the boat is a 656-meter active volcano called Gunung Api. It's just this massive, perfect, green, smoking cone dominating the entire sky.
The visual drama is intense. As the ferry glides past the volcano and you scan the shoreline of Banda Neira, you immediately see the remnants of the colonial era. There is a pastel-painted Dutch waterfront lining the harbor, looking completely out of place in the deep tropics.
Right, it looks like Europe just dropped into the jungle.
Exactly. You look slightly up the hill behind the town, and there sits the dark stone of Fort Nassau. Behind the town, the volcanic slopes are crowded with dense, dark green trees. But beyond the visual spectacle, the most arresting first impression for almost every traveler is the smell.
Yes, the smell is legendary. The very second you step off the gangway onto the concrete pier, the air physically hits you. It's this dense, warm, earthy, almost medicinal scent. It is the smell of actual nutmeg drying in the open air, on tarps in the streets everywhere around you. It completely envelops the entire town.
It's overpowering in the best way.
It is a sensory arrival that bypasses your brain and just grounds you immediately in the space. You will never forget that smell.
And it connects you instantly to the history we discussed. You aren't just looking at a historical site, you are physically breathing in the exact same aromatic commodity that brought the VOC armadas here 4 centuries ago. It's a living, breathing economy.
Okay, so you've survived the ferry, you've taken in the volcano, you are smelling the nutmeg. How do you actually get around this place?
The island of Banda Neira itself is remarkably tiny. You can literally walk the main colonial town end to end in about 20 minutes.
It's super walkable.
But if you want to explore the edges or head out to the plantations, you have a few very specific options. You can hail an ojek, which is a local motorcycle taxi, for about $1 to $2 per short trip. If you want autonomy, you can rent your own motorbike from a local family for $8 to $12 a day. Or if you want to cross the harbor over to the larger island of Banda Besar, you charter a local motorized wooden boat for roughly $15 to $35.
But what is absolutely crucial to emphasize here for the modern app-dependent traveler is what is missing from that list.
Oh, this shocks everyone. There is no Grab app. There is no Gojek. There is no Uber. There is no fleet of air-conditioned taxis waiting at a stand outside the port. If you want a ride, you are making eye contact and negotiating transport face-to-face with local operators on the street.
Which is a beautiful way to interact with the locals, but it leads to a moment of panic for a lot of people. You step off the boat, you smell the spice, you realize your rideshare app is dead, and it dawns on you, where exactly are we sleeping tonight? Which brings us to segment 4. If there are no massive hotels, what is the accommodation landscape actually like?
The inventory reality of the Banda Islands is incredibly stark. Across the main habitable area, there are perhaps 10 to 15 total places to stay.
Total. For the whole island.
That is the entire island's capacity.
And let's be crystal clear about what is not there. There are no massive mega resorts. There are no international brand names. You will never find a Marriott, a Hilton, or a Four Seasons here. There are 0 corporate chains and definitely no manicured swim-up pool bars playing lounge house music. So true. The accommodation broadly breaks down into 4 specific tiers. Let's start at the bottom with the budget backpacker tier, which runs a phenomenally low $15 to $25 a night.
That is absurdly cheap.
It is. At this price point, you are looking at places like Zahira Guest House or Banda Homestay. These are essentially spare rooms built into a local family's home. They are perfectly clean but incredibly basic. You get a standing fan, absolutely no air conditioning shared bathrooms down the hall, and the massive, unquantifiable bonus of having authentic home-cooked meals with the host family included in that tiny room rate.
It is a deeply immersive, highly local experience. You aren't just a guest, you are a temporary fixture in a family's daily life. You'll likely sit at the kitchen table with them, eat what they eat, and learn firsthand about the local rhythms, like how the nutmeg harvest is progressing or when the fish market is best.
Leaving one step up, we hit the mid-range tier. This runs about $40 to $75 per night. The most famous and historically significant example here is the Malana Inn. It sits right on the waterfront, occupying a beautifully restored Dutch colonial building.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It has soaring high ceilings, classic colonial tiled floors, massive wooden verandas, and you can literally sit at a wooden table and look directly at the smoking Gunung Api volcano while you eat your breakfast. Now, I have to stop and push back here. $40 to $75 for a colonial waterfront heritage stay with active volcano views. What is the catch? Because anywhere else in the world, in Penang, in Gale, in Cartagena, that exact same room is $400 a night.
The catch is the inescapable reality of the island's infrastructure. At that mid-range price, you must actively expect intermittent electricity.
Ah, the power grid.
Right. The power grid on Banda relies on localized diesel generators, and the power will drop out, often on a scheduled load-shedding basis to conserve fuel. You must expect slow and quite frequently non-existent hot water.
So cold showers.
Yes. And when the ceiling fan stops spinning in the middle of a sweltering 30-degree humid night because the island's grid went down, you realize exactly why that room is only $60. The architecture is atmospheric and deeply full of character, but the underlying mechanics of the hotel are definitely not seamless luxury.
Yeah.
You are paying for the history, not the
plumbing.
Exactly, not the plumbing at all.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, moving up again, we have the diver-focused tier, which runs roughly $60 to $95 a night. A great example of this is the Nutmeg Tree Hotel and Dive. It's very intimate, just 4 rooms set inside another colonial building. But this tier is run explicitly for the scuba diving community. You stay here not for the thread count of the sheets, but because they have the most reliable compressors, the best maintained dive boats, and the local knowledge required to get you safely out to those deep, treacherous outer reefs where the hammerheads are.
And finally, we have to address the splurge or luxury tier. If you demand true, uninterrupted luxury, meaning continuous 247 air conditioning, high-end linens, and gourmet food, it simply does not exist on land in the Banda Islands. To achieve that tier, you have to be floating on the water.
Literally on a boat.
Yes. This tier runs $180 to $500 per night, and it is facilitated primarily via international liveaboard vessels. Operators like Aqua Expeditions and Emperor Divers include the Banda Sea on their wider multi-week Maluku dive circuits.
So these are basically floating luxury hotels.
Floating boutique hotels meant for serious, high-budget divers who want absolute premium comfort between their world-class deep-wall dives. A full week on one of these circuits will cost you roughly $3,500 to $6,000.
So you have a massive financial crife. You either spend $60 and sweat through a power cut, or you spend $4,000 to sleep on a luxury yacht. There's no in between. Now on to segment 5. If that land-based mid-range option means you might have to deal with intermittent power, you're probably wondering what the food situation looks like in a place that has absolutely zero modern supermarkets. Where do you eat, and what are you eating?
Dining on Banda is essentially an open invitation into authentic Indonesian Maluku home cooking. There are no Michelin stars here, but if you eat where the locals eat, the food is genuinely excellent, fresh, and deeply flavorful.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
The absolute undisputed staple of the entire region is ikan bakar, which is beautifully, simply grilled fresh fish, usually caught that exact same morning. It's served very simply with a mound of white rice, a fiery local sambal made from crushed chilies, lime, and fermented shrimp paste, and whatever green vegetables the warung owner happened to find at the morning market.
And the prices for this incredibly fresh seafood are almost unbelievable. A full, hearty meal of ikan bakar at a local warung will cost you between 25,000 and 40,000 Indonesian rupiah. In US dollars, that converts to roughly 1.60 to 2.50. You can comfortably and fully eat all 3 of your daily meals every single day for under $8 total.
It's incredible. But beyond the grilled fish, the cultural centerpiece of the food experience is the nutmeg economy itself. Nutmeg isn't just a spice they export. It is woven into every single aspect of local consumption.
Like what?
Well, the fruit of the nutmeg, the fleshy part that surrounds the valuable seed, is used extensively. You will be offered bright, tangy nutmeg jam at breakfast to put on your toast. You will find sweet, crystallized nutmeg candy sold in little plastic bags, and a deeply refreshing iced nutmeg syrup served as a midday drink.
And here's a crucial tip for you as a listener, because you are absolutely going to want to buy a bag of fresh nutmeg to bring home to your own kitchen. You can buy a small bag of the absolute freshest, highest quality nutmeg on earth for about 30,000 to 50,000 rupiah. This is roughly $2 to $3. But this transaction is an experience in itself. This is the one place on the trip where you will be haggling directly with a local farmer at a wooden market stall under the hot sun, and the entire transaction happens in rupiah. It is a completely unmediated, ancient form of commerce. You aren't tapping a credit card on a screen. But you need to calibrate your brain for this. When the farmer says 50,000, you need to instantly know in your head that it's just $3. I see tourists all the time stressing and arguing over a 5,000 rupiah difference, completely forgetting that they are aggressively haggling over 35 cents.
Just pay the farmer. Just pay them.
Yes.
Beyond the local wet markets where you buy fish and spices, we absolutely must address basic provisions. Let me be perfectly clear. There are 0 supermarkets on the Banda Islands. No 7-Eleven, no Carrefour, no mini-marts.
So where do you buy stuff?
The closest thing you will find to a grocery store is a small, independently run general warung shop on the main dirt street of Banda Neira. It sells absolute, bare-bones basics. A large bottle of drinking water will cost you about 40 cents USD. A packet of instant Indomie noodles is about 30 cents USD. They might have a few dusty packs of sweet biscuits, some basic canned goods, maybe some soap, and that is the absolute extent of your grocery shopping. If you have specific dietary needs, specific snacks you can't live without, or specific toiletries, you must bring them with you from your home country.
And let's talk about the alcohol situation, because for a lot of travelers, having a drink is a core part of being on vacation. Banda has a deeply conservative Muslim majority population. Because of the religious demographics, alcohol is not part of the local culture.
It's very sparse.
Beer is only sporadically available, usually only at the dive resorts or a couple of specific guest houses, and you will almost never see it openly displayed or advertised. If having a glass of wine on the balcony at sunset or a specific spirit is an important part of your travel ritual, you need to actively plan for it. You need to buy it in Ambon, or better yet, duty-free before you even arrive in Indonesia, pack it securely in your luggage, and bring it on the ferry with you.
Which naturally brings us to a brief but incredibly vital etiquette note. You are an invited guest in a remote conservative community. Out of basic respect for the Muslim community that is hosting you, you must dress modestly when walking around the town of Banda Neira.
Super important point.
If you are out on a dive boat or hanging out on a secluded, uninhabited beach wearing shorts, vest tops, or swimwear, is perfectly fine and accepted. But the moment you step off the boat and walk into the streets, the markets, or the historical sites, you need to cover your shoulders and your knees. It shows basic cultural respect, and I promise you, it will entirely dictate how warmly and openly you are received by the local residents.
Absolutely. The locals are incredibly hospitable, but that hospitality is a two-way street based on respect. Okay, segment 6. So we have the beds sorted out, we know how to hire the wooden boats, and we know exactly what a plate of grilled fish and a bag of raw nutmeg costs. Let's take all these micro costs, tally them up, and see what the exact daily out-of-pocket budget looks like. I love running these numbers because they are just wild compared to the rest of the world. Let's start with the low-budget backpacker.
The value proposition for the backpacker here is genuinely stunning. We are talking about an all-in daily survival cost of 30 to 40 US dollars a day, total.
Let's break that math down so it doesn't sound like we're just making it up. You spend $18 for your room at a local homestay, which, remember, usually includes a simple breakfast. You spend a total of $8 for your other 2 massive meals of fish and rice at the local warungs. You drop $2 to hire an ojek motorcycle to zip you across town to the fort, and maybe you spend $3 to rent a basic, slightly scratched mask and snorkel from your guest house owner to swim off the pier. That adds up to exactly $31.
It is arguably the most honest, authentic, $35 a day travel experience left anywhere in the Indonesian archipelago. You are getting pure, unfiltered access to world-class history and pristine marine nature without any of the artificial inflated markups you find in Bali, simply because there is literally nothing else on the island to spend your money on. There are no beach clubs charging $20 entry fees.
Next up, the mid-range traveler. This is the sweet spot for a lot of people listening. You are looking at 80 to 120 US dollars a day per person. Let's say you're spending $60 for that atmospheric colonial inn room. You spend $15 a day for slightly better or more varied meals, maybe at the Milana Inn restaurant. You spend $25 as your half of a split wooden boat charter to go explore an outer island for the day. And you spend another $25 for a single tank fun dive on the reef. So 2 people traveling together as a couple are spending roughly $160 to $220 a day, all in, for a phenomenal active trip.
Then we have to consider the family budget, assuming a standard setup of 2 adults and 2 children. You are looking at a daily burn rate of $220 to $300 US dollars a day. That covers $120 to rent 2 adjacent rooms in a nice colonial guest house, $25 total to feed the entire family massive portions at the warungs, $35 to hire a private wooden charter boat for the afternoon to take the whole family across the water to the Banda Besar nutmeg plantations, and $20 to rent snorkeling gear for everyone.
And obviously, as we established earlier, the luxury tier is entirely a different beast because it only exists via those international liveaboards. That is a flat, uncompromising 300 to 500 US dollars a day per person, amortized over a week-long sailing, plus your port transfers and nitrox dive packages. But looking at those incredible land-based budgets, I have to ask a question that I know a lot of remote workers are screaming right now. With prices this low and views this good, could I just pack up my laptop, cancel my apartment lease back home, move to Banda for a month, and work remotely as a digital nomad? I mean, an entire month living in a colonial inn here would only cost me 1,200 to 1,600 US dollars.
I am going to give that idea a very hard, very definitive shutdown. The theory is beautiful, but the lived technological reality is an absolute deal breaker for modern remote work. Let's talk about the internet.
It's bad, isn't it?
There is no fiber optic cable running to Banda. Mobile data is your one and only lifeline to the outside world, and it is provided exclusively via one monopoly telecom provider, Telkomsel. The bandwidth is incredibly narrow, and the speeds are wildly inconsistent depending on the weather and how many locals are using the tower.
Ouch.
Add to that the fact we discussed earlier. The island grid relies on localized diesel. Daily power cuts occur routinely and almost predictably between 2:00 p.m. and 6:00 p.m. every single afternoon. If your job requires you to be on a live Zoom call, or if you need a reliable, sustained connection for uploading large video files or accessing secure corporate servers, Banda is simply not viable. It will cost you your job. It is a perfect destination if you are writing a novel entirely offline, but it is a terrible choice for remote corporate work.
Fair enough. Sabbaticals only, no Zoom calls. But here's the reality check on those incredible budget numbers, leading us into segment 7. A cheap $35 a day destination gets catastrophically expensive very quickly if you fall into one of the 3 major logistical traps of the region. This is arguably the most critical part of our entire deep dive, because if you ignore these, your trip will derail before it even starts. Let's outline trap 1, the twice-weekly ferry trap.
The mechanism of this trap is its absolute unforgiving rigidity. As we discussed, the fast ferry strictly departs Tuluhu Port in Ambon on Tuesday and Saturday mornings. It strictly returns from Banda on Wednesday and Sunday. There is absolutely no flexibility, no alternative fast boat, and no private speedboat you can hire to bail you out if you mess this up.
So imagine the scenario. You book a tight flight connection from Jakarta that lands in Ambon at 7:00 a.m., thinking you can grab a taxi and make the 9 a.m. Tuesday morning ferry. But your flight is delayed. You miss the boat. You are now stuck in the city of Ambon, waiting 4 agonizing days for the Saturday boat. You are burning your carefully planned travel budget on Ambon city hotels. You are burning your precious vacation days sitting in a transit hub, and your morale is completely tanking before you've even seen a nutmeg tree.
The fix for this trap is non-negotiable. You must always, always build in a mandatory one-night buffer in Ambon before your ferry departure. Never, under any circumstances, attempt a same-day flight to ferry connection. Book a comfortable room at the Swiss Berlin in Ambon for
Which leads directly into explaining exactly why you're going to miss that tight connection, bringing us to trap 2, the Indonesian domestic flight chaos trap. Why is attempting a same-day connection such a gamble? Because the domestic aviation system in this part of the world operates on its own timeline.
The operational reality of the domestic carriers serving Ambon, which are primarily Garuda, Batik Air, and Lion Air, is highly volatile. Because of the hub-and-spoke model of Indonesian aviation, flights to Ambon usually route through massive bottlenecks in Jakarta or Makassar. In 2026, 3 to 5 hour rolling delays on these specific routes are completely routine.
Routine.
Yes. Furthermore, daily route cancellations due to weather, maintenance, or simple operational efficiency happen with alarming frequency and minimal notice. If you try to connect from an exhausting international flight directly onto a domestic regional flight to Ambon on the exact same calendar day, you are essentially playing Russian roulette with your itinerary.
The fix here is exactly the same philosophy we just discussed. Never connect internationally to Ambon on the same calendar day. Budget an extra 30 to 50 US dollars for a cheap, clean, overnight transit hotel stop in Jakarta or Makassar. Get a good night's sleep, shake off the jet lag, and fly the next day. Think of that $50 hotel room as literally the cheapest, most effective travel insurance you can possibly buy.
Finally, we have Trap 3, the cash-only island trap. The mechanism here is simple, but the consequences are devastating if you ignore it. There is exactly one functioning ATM on the entire island of Banda Neira.
One.
It is located near the local market. It routinely and unpredictably rejects international bank cards, and because the island is cash-heavy, the machine frequently runs completely out of physical banknotes. Furthermore, there is absolutely zero credit card acceptance on the islands. None. Your Visa or Amex is useless plastic.
So imagine you show up off the ferry with 50 bucks in your pocket thinking, oh, I'll just hit the ATM when I need more cash for dinner, or I'll just put the hotel and the scuba diving on my travel credit card. No, you won't. The machine declines your card. You are suddenly entirely out of money. You can't pay for your grilled fish, you can't hire a boat charter, you can't pay for your dives, and you'll be reduced to awkwardly begging your guesthouse owner to open a tab for you based purely on trust until you can somehow get back to Ambon to find a working bank. The fix. Withdraw all the physical Indonesian rupiah you could possibly need while you are still standing in the city of Ambon well before you get anywhere near that ferry port.
If you calculate a standard 5-day mid-range budget, you are looking at needing roughly 3 million Indonesian rupiah in cash, which is about 190 US dollars. Go to an ATM in Ambon, pull all of it out in physical cash and secure it in your bag. And as a strict mandatory rule of thumb for remote travel, calculate your total estimated budget and then bring a 30% emergency cash buffer on top of that.
Why the extra 30%?
Because if the ferry gets delayed by weather for 3 days on your way back, you still need to pay for food and a bed while you wait.
That is such a good point. Okay, segment 8. Assuming you are a meticulous planner, you successfully navigate the delayed planes, you master the unforgiving ferry schedule, and you show up with a giant thick stack of rupiah in your backpack. What are the actual physical risks to your safety and comfort once you finally step onto the islands?
When assessing a remote destination, we always need to separate human risk from environmental risk. In terms of human risk, meaning interpersonal crime, theft, muggings, or the highly organized, typical tourist scam ecosystems you find in heavily trafficked international hubs, Banda is practically crime-free.
Why is that?
It comes down to the tight social fabric of the island. You have a deeply isolated community of only 20,000 people. Everyone knows everyone else's family. There's immense social pressure to maintain harmony, and frankly, if someone were to steal a tourist camera, where are they going to go? They live on a tiny rock in the middle of the ocean.
It's incredible. Solo female travelers consistently report feeling significantly safer walking around the dark streets of Banda Neira at night than they do in major Western international hubs. As long as you follow the modest dress code we detailed earlier, you will be treated with immense, genuine respect and warmth by the community.
However, while the human risk is low, the environmental hierarchy of risk is very real, deeply uncompromising, and must be respected. First on that list is seasickness.
We mentioned this earlier, but it's worth reiterating.
As we described, the Banda Sea is notoriously rough due to the depths and currents. That 6-hour fast ferry ride can be an absolutely brutal physical ordeal. The critical advice here is to take pharmaceutical motion sickness medication before you board the vessel, while you are still standing on dry land. Once you are on the boat, the waves hit and you start feeling ill, your body will not absorb the medication. It is too late.
Then there is the giant, smoky It's a visually stunning mountain, but it is an active volcano. It last erupted violently in 1988, causing massive evacuations and destroying the local coral reefs with lava flows. Now, it is heavily monitored by the Indonesian Geological Agency with modern seismic equipment, so it's not an active panic situation where you need to sleep with one eye open, but it is a genuine, undeniable geographical reality of where you have chosen to stand.
Yeah, and on a practical daily basis, the most persistent guaranteed risks are the sun and mosquitoes. You are located just 4 degrees south of the equator. The UV index is extreme, and travelers arriving from northern, cooler climates consistently and dangerously underestimate how fast they will suffer severe sunburn, especially when out on the reflective water in local bogs. Additionally, dengue fever, which is a severe mosquito-borne illness, is present in Maluku province. Applying high-quality DE mosquito repellent every single morning and reapplying every evening at dusk is a mandatory health protocol, not an optional convenience.
Let's do a quick comfort check for families, because we mentioned a family budget earlier. Is this actually a viable place to drag your kids? The reality is, it is fantastic for kids who are 10 years or older, who can swim well, and who are already comfortable with the unpredictable nature of adventure travel. But it is a hard, absolute no for infants, toddlers, or absolutely anyone of any age with a serious underlying medical condition.
Simply because of the hospital situation.
Right, because the nearest modern hospital of any real scale or capability is a 6-hour rough ocean ferry ride away back in Ambon.
That intense geographical isolation is the ultimate arbiter of who should and should not attempt this trip. If you have a condition that might require rapid access to emergency care or pediatric care, the logistics of Banda make it an irresponsible and potentially fatal choice. You must be self-sufficient.
Okay, Moving to segment 9. Let's assume you fit the profile perfectly. You've weighed the environmental risks, you've survived the brutal 6-hour ferry, you've got your cash, and you're ready to explore. What is the ultimate payoff for all this suffering? And conversely, to keep it totally honest, what will inevitably disappoint you? Let's start with the highs, because the peaks of this trip are incredible.
The absolute centerpiece land-based experience is undoubtedly visiting Fort Belgica at sunrise. This is a massive, incredibly well-preserved, classic star-shaped Dutch fort built in 1611. It sits strategically on a hill commanding a panoramic view of the entire harbor and the volcano.
And the craziest part about visiting a 400-year-old, globally significant piece of military architecture: there are no tickets, there are no velvet ropes telling you where you can't step, there are no boring audio guides, and there are absolutely no obnoxious neon-lit gift shops. You just walk up the hill and walk right through the gates. It is entirely free to enter, though leaving a voluntary cash donation for the local caretaker family who weeds the courtyard is highly, highly encouraged. You can literally walk up the steep stone steps, sit by yourself on a 400-year-old stone wall next to a rusted iron cannon, look out over the active volcano as the sun comes up, and be the only human being there. It's a level of unmediated access to history that simply doesn't exist anywhere else in the world anymore.
It's a profound feeling of temporal displacement. And just as profound as the history above the water is what lies beneath the surface. Diving the vertical walls of the Banda Sea is an extraordinary world-class experience. And the value is absurd. You are paying $25–35 per dive, which includes your compressed air tank, your weights, your local dive guide, and the boat ride out to the reef.
And what are you actually seeing on that wall?
Because of the deep water upwelling we discussed, the coral health here is remarkably robust. Because it was essentially paved over by lava in 1988, the subsequent regrowth is incredibly vigorous. It is significantly healthier and more vibrant than what you will find in the heavily trafficked, overdived areas of Bali or Lombok. The sheer density of the fish life and the health of the hard corals is entirely comparable to the legendary, highly expensive biodiversity of Raja Ampat. You are floating over a bottomless abyss watching eagle rays and sharks cruise by.
Another massive high that you cannot miss is the Banda Besar nutmeg walk. You go down to the harbor, you charter one of those little motorized wooden boats for $10 to $15, and you have the captain take you across the water to the massive island of Banda Besar. You step off the boat and you walk inland along the exact same stone-paved 17th century plantation paths that the Dutch laid out centuries ago. You are literally walking under the canopy of ancient, massive nutmeg orchards. The air is thick with the spice, and at the end of the walk you can buy a kilogram of fresh nutmeg directly from the hands of the farmer who picked it. It feels like walking through a living, breathing, operational museum.
But we promised an honest verdict, which means we must ground this conversation with the honest disappointments. The flip side of that beautiful broken aesthetic we praised earlier is that things are, in fact, broken. The heritage infrastructure is rapidly and visibly deteriorating. Take Fort Nassau, for example. This is the older fort, situated down the hill closer to the water below Belgica. It is currently in a state of severe partial collapse. The tropical jungle roots are actively tearing the masonry apart, making certain interior areas genuinely unsafe to enter due to the risk of falling stone.
Right. You walk through the main streets of the colonial town and you see these originally gorgeous, imposing old Dutch administrative buildings and mansions, but they're completely roofless. They are being consumed from the inside out by jungle vegetation. They are structurally compromised. If you show up to Banda expecting a pristine, highly curated, European-style historical walking tour with lovely multilingual interpretation panels and perfectly manicured lawns, you're going to be severely, severely let down.
The other major limitation that catches modern travelers off guard is what we call the low food ceiling. As we mentioned, the local warung food, the grilled fish, the rice, the spicy sambal, is delicious, but it lacks any real sustained variety. After 4 or 5 consecutive days of eating rice and fish for lunch and then rice and fish again for dinner, you will acutely notice the repetition. There are no high-end, fine dining restaurants to break up the monotony. There is absolutely no third-wave specialty coffee culture. You won't find an air-conditioned cafe serving flat whites, and you certainly won't find a chic, ambiently lit sunset cocktail bar.
So, leading into segment 10, if deteriorating, actively collapsing forts and a total lack of cafe culture and culinary variety sound like massive, insurmountable deal breakers to you, you shouldn't go to Banda. But where should you go instead to get a similar but significantly easier fix?
We have 2 distinct, highly capable alternatives, depending on what specific aspect of the Banda Islands actually appeal to you the most. Alternative 1 is the islands of Ternate and Tidore. located further north in the province of North Maluku. These are known historically as the Northern Spice Islands, famous for cloves rather than nutmeg. This alternative is custom-built for the traveler who desperately wants the deep colonial story, the ancient forts, and the spice trade history, but who simply refuses to endure the intense logistical suffering of the Banda Ferry.
Ternate is infinitely easier to access. You have regular, reliable, direct flights straight into Ternate from major domestic hubs like Makassar and Manado. You don't have to get on a treacherous open ocean ferry. When you arrive, the historical centerpiece, Fort Orange, is beautifully maintained and restored. The island has a real, functioning ATM network that accepts international cards, a bustling city center, and a much, much wider variety of modern restaurants and cafes. A mid-range day there costs about the same as Banda, roughly 70 to 100 US dollars.
The trade-off for all that comfort, however, is significant. The scuba diving in Ternate is noticeably worse. It cannot hold a candle to the deep walls of the Banda Sea. And because the island is much more commercially developed and populated, that raw, authentic broken charm, that profound sense of solitary isolation, is far less intense. As we like to summarize it, Ternate is Banda for people who want the historical story without the physical suffering.
I love that summary. Now, Alternative 2 is located over in West Papua. It is the legendary Raja Ampat. This is the absolute global benchmark for the premium scuba diver. If world-class diving is the absolute, unquestioned primary driver of your trip and your travel budget is highly flexible, you skip Banda and you go straight to Raja Ampat. To get there, you fly into the gateway city of Sorong, which will cost you about 120 to 160 US dollars for a return flight from Jakarta.
But once you land in Sorong and take the ferry to the islands, the daily costs escalate rapidly. Raja Ampat operates on a fundamentally different economic model. Basic, fan-cooled guesthouse rooms start at 80 to 150 US dollars a night, simply because everything has to be imported. Dive packages are vastly more expensive, running 60 to 120 US dollars a day. A one-week trip to Raja Ampat will cost a standard mid-range diver between 1,400 and 2,000 US dollars, compared to the 500 to 800 dollars you would spend for a week in Banda.
The marine biodiversity in Raja Ampat is, objectively speaking, better. It is the global gold standard for coral and fish density. But it completely entirely lacks the deep, dark colonial history, the ancient forts, and the raw, centuries-old nutmeg plantations that make the surface intervals in Banda so incredibly fascinating.
Exactly. It is a direct trade. You are willingly trading historical density and cultural depth for absolute marine perfection and a significantly higher level of premium eco-resort infrastructure.
So, we're at segment 11. We have thoroughly unpacked the weight of the history. We've looked at the intense, unavoidable gateway costs. We've mapped out the 3 massive logistical traps that will ruin your trip. We've highlighted the absolute peaks of the experience, the crumbling lows, and the regional alternatives. It is time to synthesize all of this and answer the ultimate question, custom-tailored for your specific travel style. Let's deliver the final verdicts. I'll throw the profiles at you. You give me the definitive answer. First up, the independent, low-budget backpacker.
For the independent budget backpacker, the verdict is a resounding, enthusiastic YES. Provided you diligently prepare for the logistical traps, physically carry the right amount of cash from Ambon, and only travel during the dry season, the value proposition is entirely unmatched anywhere else in the world. At 35 US dollars a day for unfettered access to 400-year-old forts, world-class coral snorkeling directly off the beach, and deeply authentic Maluku family hospitality, the physical suffering of the ferry is entirely justified by the sheer magnitude of the reward.
Next profile, the mid-range traveler. The couple with a decent budget looking for a unique 2-week vacation.
The verdict is yes, but it is a highly conditional yes, predicated entirely on heavily adjusted expectations. At 80 to 120 US dollars a day, you are going to get incredible architectural character, stunning volcano views, and jaw-dropping scuba diving. But you must be mentally willing to tolerate inconsistent Wi-Fi, frustrating power cuts, and cold water showers. If you are a traveler who needs flawless, seamless service and a perfect cappuccino in the morning, you will hate it here. If you want a raw, historical experience you simply cannot buy at a luxury resort, it is outstanding.
What about the family traveler, parents looking to take the kids somewhere educational but wild?
For the family traveler, the verdict is a strict conditional yes. This destination is exclusively for families with older, robust, adventurous children who can handle intense heat, spicy food, and long boat rides without complaining. The utter lack of a modern pediatric hospital and the reality of that grueling, unpredictable 6-hour ocean ferry crossing make it a definitive, non-negotiable no for anyone attempting to travel with toddlers or infants. The risk profile is simply too high.
And what about the luxury traveler, the traveler who usually books five-star villas in Bali but wants to see the Spice Islands?
The verdict is only via liveaboard, period. Do not attempt a land-based trip. High-end land-based luxury literally does not exist on these islands. If you require fine dining, premium mattresses, and uninterrupted climate control, you have to spend the 300 to 500 US dollars a day to secure a cabin on the Emperor or Aqua Expeditions ships. Do not try to force a luxury experience onto the land-based guest houses. You will be miserable, and you will make the local hosts miserable.
Finally, what about the digital nomad and the solo traveler?
For the working digital nomad who relies on being online to earn an income, the verdict is a hard no. The fragile internet infrastructure will fail you, and you will stress yourself out trying to upload a file while the power grid goes down. However, for a solo traveler who is on a true sabbatical, looking to completely disconnect their brain from the modern world, it is a massive, definitive yes-co.
Oh, I completely agree. If you just want to take a profound break from the noise of the world, sit on a 400-year-old rusted cannon at sunrise in total absolute solitude and just feel the physical weight of global history under your feet, there is nowhere better on the map.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you pondering. We discussed the loud ticking clock of the 2026 UNESCO nomination. When that heritage status is formally granted, and the millions in international funding finally arrive, when the crumbling walls of Fort Belgica get structurally stabilized and they build a shiny ticket booth, a neatly paved walkway, and an air-conditioned gift shop selling branded merchandise, will the Banda Islands finally be safely fixed and preserved for future generations? Or will they have permanently lost the exact, raw, beautifully broken quality that makes the extreme journey worth taking today?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
See you next time.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.